The reason I say that we need to connect with one another is because we are bottling up too much. We're holding up too much into us of our fears, of our grievances, of what's bothering us, what's holding us back. The fear that people are trying to make ends meet and keep up and provide for family themselves, and young people trying to get a start is real. But we have to connect with other people and get the support. And too many people are going about it alone. And this is making the problem worse. And if we're going to be able to be positioned in success, to not only take advantage of good opportunities, we got to start putting the foundation in place. And it starts coming from leaning in and building community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ascending Thoughts, the podcast and the show where we talk about the issues of today and the tumultuous times and how we can overcome these times and strive to greater personal, business, and life success. I'm here with our host, MrRogers. Will, it's a pleasure to have you on the show again.
Good afternoon, neighbors. Welcome to our neighborhood in the metaverse, our own metahood, where on this show we are going to talk and basically have a safe space where we can help inspire people. We're in a time when there's a tremendous amount of fear, anxiety, divisiveness out there. And we want to basically reach to all of those out there in our neighborhood who are communicating and visiting us through social media and connect with one another to basically inspire and basically uplift to a better tomorrow.
That sounds good. And welcome back, viewers. It's been a few weeks since we've seen you. William, I'd like to what's been going on in the world and just a quick little recap of the last few weeks, and then we can get back into the topics of the day.
Just some of what has just been going on, Brian, is when we look in terms of the last few weeks after Labor Day and the general discussion and feeling, I think that we would sum it up with there's just a general angst out there. And that angst is just permeating and boiling, and people honestly feel on edge. There is a tremendous amount when we talk about state of mental health, young people, teenagers, and everyone in general. And so I think that it's extremely pervasive when we look on it out there. And I think that's extremely relevant in terms of today's show. We want to talk about three kind of forces that are playing into that general angst.
Yeah, you talked about those three forces. And for the viewers out there, the show here today is going to be about the three R's. We have rising inflation, the risk of recession, and also we have the risk of higher interest rates that is illuminating around the bend for us. So I just wanted to start off here with the first one for the rise of inflation. What's the backstory on that over the last few months with inflation coming up? I know housing and also with...
Can hit it on the head in terms of in your own personal life and what your peers and friends and everyone is currently experiencing. I think that you had a close friend of yours who just was recently trying to go and get a house and remarking in terms of what that price is. I think that you and your significant other, as you're recently traveling, you're trying to digest the cost of going out and what the gas pump is in terms of doing. And we see all those impacts out there, whether you're trying to go out and get baby formula and diapers, go to the grocery store, all of those factors on a daily basis, it feels that prices are ultimately just rising and getting out of control faster than our incomes can keep up.
Yeah, exactly. I know a personal friend of mine moved out of state, out of California to purchase a home, and he's doing well out there. And it just feels that the dollars are not what they used to be in terms of spending power because of the inflation, the cost of living, and of course the housing for younger generations.
This is not solely a California phenomenon.
Yeah.
This is going on realistically worldwide. When you were mentioning earlier that your friend had moved from California to North Carolina, it's just prices relative for us from California compared that looks cheap, but for everyone who's in North Carolina has gone up tremendously. as a lot of people had moved into our nearby state in Arizona, Phoenix, and that metro area has gone up tremendously. Colorado, Texas, Idaho, and all of them, and as well as the various nations. And I was remarking with people in terms of in the UK and London. And so this is a global phenomenon that we're going through right now in terms of this rapid inflation.
Yeah, and we see this affecting everybody. And I'm just wondering, what can we do as the viewers, as a younger generation, myself, to maximize our quality of life, to overcome some of these struggles that might be out of our control?
Right. Well, and in terms of when we're getting in times like this where we feel like we're getting pummeled, we're getting one hit after another hit, we oftentimes feel alone, that we're isolated. We don't have people to talk to, people to go and get help. And we have to realize the power of community. And we will get to in terms of in that relevance so that we are not alone. And in addition, the benefit and exponential power of helping other people by doing those good deeds. And one of the prime examples is what we saw in terms of captivating on the news last week was the tremendous catastrophe throughout the state of Florida with Hurricane Ian. And in the story of strangers coming out and helping strangers. And so when we're in this time of inflation, in this time of turmoil, we need to turn inward to help others. And by helping those, we will start in the path of changing our overall outlook, appreciating what we have, and finding the opportunity to get ahead.
Yeah, I think that we need to put emotions aside and really look to our communities and the people around us to really come together and build and to uplift each other instead of just fighting neck and neck.
It's okay to acknowledge the feelings, the emotions that we have. It is just improper that we have to go and lash out on other people unfairly. The reason I say that we need to connect with one another is because we are bottling up too much. We're holding up too much into us of our fears, of our grievances, of what's bothering us, what's holding us back. The fear that people are trying to make ends meet and keep up and provide for family themselves, and young people trying to get start is real. But we have to connect with other people and get the support. And too many people are going about it alone. And this is making the problem worse. And if we're going to be able to be positioned in success, to not only take advantage of good opportunities, we got to start putting the foundation in place. And it starts coming from leaning in and building community.
Yeah, and that community aspect of growing, whether it's a small town or a larger city, with those sub-communities.
Some of the basics is just your local friend group.
Yeah.
Too much of us in today's modern times is that we casually speak with our friends. It's just via text, but we don't connect. We don't sit down. We don't talk. That connection is important in our own healing. And this is what people need to do to start to address this overall fundamental anxiety.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm still digesting what you're saying, but I agree with you on that for sure. I think that those are really powerful words that definitely need to be thought of, and really the communication with people is so vital, whether it's with your friends, your family, or your coworkers, just to be able to speak your mind and communicate your anxieties and what's going on. So I think that is definitely step one for helping
to process the feelings, the mix of range of fears and emotions going on. So then, therefore, we can start to see with clarity the potential solutions and take proper actions, which is the part where we want to ascend to. But we just can't come out with the solution until we address the ailment of what's really bothering us, of listening and trying to release that pain.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of people out there that still are holding in those feelings, and maybe they're scared to open up, or maybe they just don't want to open up or anything of that nature.
We call it mode.
Yeah.
And you get people who are older as well, as that they've lived their lives. They've taken the toll on their families, their peers. They've grown disconnected from loved ones and friends and become more and more isolated. What we need to do and take a pause in these type of situations when we're talking about we're facing this inundation that we have in terms of we feel like one hit after another. When you see in terms of these headlines of on the news, we have a major catastrophic storm. We have this war that's raging, that's going on with no end in sight. We have inflation that just doesn't seem like it's getting out of control. An interest rate hike after interest rate. There's going to be a general feeling of our lives are just out of control. And so this talk, this support system is absolutely key so that people can sense that we're not alone. And then we can also have people that we can help out to one another, because our path to ultimate success is we need to be interdependent, not independent. And that is the key. And too many of us are staunchly stubborn. We want to do alone. We want to tough it out. But the key to ultimate success, to sail and ascend through life, is being interdependent.
Yeah, I think that looking back, I feel that I was interdependent, and I feel that so many more of the viewers were interdependent. And then with the pandemic, I feel that people got put into those more isolated mindsets just because of the pandemic. And how can we get more towards that interdependency and get out of that isolated mindset?
Well, the pandemic was just one massive disruption for your age group because you didn't have prior experience, whereas others, in terms of in my age demographic, we had the financial crash, which was 2008. We also had September 11th. You're going to have massive disruptive events occur in your life. It was just the first one in your adulthood. So it is a watershed moment in that your outlook before and your outlook and after has been fundamentally altered. The issues in terms of we oftentimes in disruption, some people can become detached and they can muddle and spiral in that kind of mode for a very long time. And others find a renewed sense of where they can find that tight, close circle of the circle who they can lean on to, who leans on each other. But the brilliance that comes out of it is that's where our new opportunities can also be born. Because what we have to realize is in the natural state of the world, we have this natural cycle that always happens in economics and everything is we have this death and destruction. You know, you have birth, you have growth, maturation, destruction, and it starts all over again. And what we try to teach one another is to develop a more long-term oriented strategic view so that, yes, disruption is going to happen. It's unfortunate because of the human fact that it can happen, but we're trying to understand that things happen and how to adapt and respond appropriately, as well as thrive and take advantage of the upcoming opportunities. And in this time, we need to reinforce and build our sense of community, because that sense of community is when we talk about a new job prospect, a new opportunity, that's what opens those up, because you're not isolated. Some people may know about a new company or a new startup, and you can help out each other. It's that support system.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's definitely, I think that is more, I know you're a big of the contrarian mindset type of guy, and I think that a lot of people need to hear that open communication is vital for everybody for getting to that next level.
In a time like this, when we are trying to address to all of our neighbors out there, is that mental health should take precedence, is that people need to be open about how they're feeling, what their fears are, what their grievances is, what their frustrations is, so that we can, in a sense, try to process that. And then also, as we are taking inventory, develop a means and a pathway. Is there certain things that I can control and many things I can't control? Have to take solace in that. And basically in what's going on in terms of in your current plight.
Yeah. You have to take that inventory of what are the things you can control versus the things you can't control.
Correct.
And really put your cards into the things that you can control.
Correct. And building community is our way of creating that positive counterforce of how we can repel some of these forces, because the multiplier effect that goes on is community. Community is the ultimate antidote to any of these external forces.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I agree on that one for sure with the community. And I think that going through my years, I've seen a little bit of an imbalance of that community. You know, I think that after the pandemic, I think people were still a little wary, and people still are, of that community approach. And I think that we still have a lot to rebuild to.
Part of it's our culture, Brian. Our culture has changed, that we are consumers of a lot of what we call social media. So we've lost touch with the traditional means of community. And community is human, meaning that it has to be in touch. Whether some people choose to attend church and they grow close with people in their congregation, those who play sports, who are in local organizations. But the fact that we are so reliant on social media, and we communicate with the vast majority of our friends and family via these means, whether it's through text messages or through chat and Instagram. My point is that we're not growing connected. The technology is allowing us to communicate, but it's not allowing us to feel the human connection.
Yeah, like you sitting and I face to face, I can feel the tone in your voice and sense the aura in the room.
Or if I'm not saying anything, you know that something's bothering me. And as well as, let's be honest, most people are trying to present in terms of a false face. I think that we have been lulled in our society, and what's fed into a lot of this general angst is that we have created this idolization of false celebrities, and we've created this crisis of narcissism. And it is what is clearly ailing in terms of people, because we're placing all of our hopes in a savior of the famous when our savior is in front of us. Our people doing good deeds, the everyday people. Go find, as the late MrRogers said, find the people doing good deeds. And they're around you every day. Those are the acts of generosity and kindness that build greatness. They just are not influencers. They don't build 1 million views. And we have to turn it off. We have to go and change that, because that's what's making us feel so bad. We're putting all that idolized on a pedestal when it's just a false facade. And at the end of the day, they don't care about us. They care about them.
Yeah. And for example, even opening up the door for someone, you go to a restaurant, you go to a grocery store, anything like that, just holding the door open for someone, people are awestruck that you have the common courtesy to do, just because that's how I was raised. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's just a normal thing to do, is just be nice to the person next to you. And it just is, for me, it's the normal thing to do. But for others, it feels that they're not used to that. And I'm sitting thinking, that's how it should be. Just open the door and be polite.
And then basically, in terms of, for us to ascend in life, we need to make conscientious actions of doing good deeds.
Yeah. And the effort too.
And it doesn't have to be much, but we need to make conscientious efforts that we are contributing to the overall positive vibe in the society and community. And it will pay dividends back to us. How we feel in our hearts, how we feel up here, and our general outlook in life. And ultimately, turn it off. You don't need to watch it. You don't need to watch in terms of whether it was the TikTok or the influencer who's basically streaming on Instagram. Turn it off.
Yeah. No one's forcing you to watch it. You can do something. You can
connect
meditate,
with a friend.
Connect with
someone who you haven't spoken to in a long time. Connect with a friend.
Yeah. And I can guarantee that you're going to feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Just hearing their voice. So that's great. Let's move on to the next topic here. I wanted to talk about the risk of higher interest rates. Can you give us just a little update on what's going on with, I know the Federal Reserve is going to increase the interest rates.
They just increased interest rates 0.75 of a basis point last week. It's the 5th interest rate hike we've seen this year. So we've seen interest rates dramatically rise this year. It's the Federal Reserve's response to basically address and tamp down the inflation. The direct impact that it's going to have to everyone out there is that your credit card, as you're carrying interest, it's going to get a lot more expensive. People who are trying to go out and buy a car, that car payment going up. Those out there with student loans, those student loan monthly payments are going to go up. So it definitely, we as everyday people will feel an effect of rising interest rates. Ultimately, what it does is, think of it as you're going to go out, Brian, and you're going to go take a nice strollerly jog. It's a beautiful afternoon, isn't it? How about I give you this backpack and you start out the backpack with 10 pounds in the backpack?
Definitely going to go a little bit slower.
Okay. But you haven't made one lap yet. And I said, Brian, hold on there. I got to add 25 more pounds.
I'm not going to.
Okay. As you're rounding that corner on one lap, and I need you 2 laps to go, Brian, I got to put another 25 pounds. And that's what it does ultimately in terms of in the economy on a daily basis, is that as companies need to borrow money, it's those weights that they put in their backpack that limits them from the ability to hire and expand, as well as too is our economy is very much driven by consumers is, am I going to continue in my old car or lease or buy a new car? Buy a home in terms of that mortgage interest rate. And also too, many people, unfortunately, they have quite a bit of credit card debt. And the credit card debt, as I keep putting that weight as you're jogging around the track, think about it as you're making the monthly payment and you're carrying that balance because you can afford to pay the medical bill. You had a big unexpected expense and you're chipping away trying to pay it down. It's going up. It's going up. And it's taking longer and longer to get out of debt. Like it's longer and longer for you to complete that jog.
Yeah, and it seems that now that jog might never end.
You feel like you're going to collapse and it's going to break you.
Yeah.
And that's the general angst that a lot of people feel, is that I'm drowning in debt that I'll never get out of. And it's the fear, it's the anxiety, and the feelings of overwhelm, of being overwhelmed and hopelessness that they don't see how they can get out of it.
Yeah, and I want to talk about my generation, younger adults, people that graduate college. I'm 27 years old. People my age are feeling the angst of what can we see in 5 years? What can we think about for growing our wealth? Do we want to be continuous renters? We'd all want to own a home someday or a condo. What can we see now and look forward to the future? The number one thing that any young person can do is to build their value. And what does that mean? Your overall earning prospects. Because your human capital, your ability to earn a living is going to dramatically dictate your future outcome, your lifestyle. And when we take ownership of that, not at 30, not at 40, but as early as possible, we are able to now, as different opportunities are availing, to go and basically determine, do I continue? Do I change a job? Do I change a career? Do I improve in my skills? We have to overall and look in building the brand of you. And the brand of you is not just how you market and present yourself. It's the toolbox that you put in there on a daily basis. And I am a constant believer of continuous improvement. That too many of us fall into a tendency is that we want to be complacent. We want to just go about life, go and get a job. And then if the job's not working out, I want to change to another. It's not necessarily job hopping. It's also skills building and experience building, and what your overall brand is. At the end of the day, you have to provide a solution, a value proposition of what you can bring to the table, that you can go out there to any potential company and make money. But the bigger question that you need to address in the mirror, ultimately success, is you're at that pivot point is, am I better off doing it for an employer or for myself? And the true pathway to ultimate success and being the captain of your own destiny, where you really grab the rein, where you feel you have control of your life and destiny, is to basically
be your own boss and hire yourself. But a lot of us aren't willing to take that risk. So therefore, you have to take ownership of your career, which is that portfolio of skills, how you brand yourself and position yourself out there. It's not just the company that you're with, it's also the industry, because industries are subject to different economic cycles, and what can be a hot industry in a few years could be obsolete. And how you position throughout that, it's in developing the strategic mindset.
Yeah, and so you can metamorphosize your brand, who are you, to those companies, and then if you want, ultimately you can work for yourself and be your own boss.
Or you can transition into what was a mature industry into a new emerging industry. It's just basically is what we want to teach in terms of all of our neighbors out there is how to develop that strategic mindset. And part of it is scanning the overall environment. When we see these kind of disruptive, negative headwinds that go on, the contrarian mindset teaches us to look for the opportunity, not to be fearful.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel, and with the 40-hour work week, the 9 to 5 that so many of our viewers and neighbors have, I would assume so. I feel that you get so stuck in that 40-hour week and you see that paycheck and you're sitting and you're thinking to yourself, wow, gas is now $7 a gallon. I only make this much.
But people haven't stripped away, Brian, of why you're only worth that much. They're just saying is that's what I get. And then it just becomes a bargaining power. So if you are a worker who makes $22 an hour, I want 25. It's a horse trading. Figure out how do I be $50 an hour? How do I be $150 an hour? It's basically, it's the skills, the position, and or industry that's going on. You have to take active management of that. You just can't muddle around passively.
Yeah, that definitely resonates personally for me on that one. That's such a great point. Is
my ultimate business philosophy, and as well as in any human development, has to be value creation.
Yeah.
And when value creation can be created for not only the company, it can also be created for its workforce. Those benefits can accrue to everyone. So we have to go take a holistic view of how we create value, so that not only once we've created value, we have the opportunity to capture it. You've heard of about haves and have-nots, right? And this growing frustration that there's this select group of people who, for some reason, tend to be reaping and making off. It's, for example, as we had in terms of the pandemic created this huge opportunity that numerous amounts of high-tech, highly paid tech workers can go in Airbnb out in Idaho, Montana, or they can be in the Caribbean and earn their salaries from Silicon Valley and bank all the money because they don't have the high cost of living. But the everyday essential workers or people who have to work face to face aren't able to do that because of the nature of their jobs. The point that I'm trying to make in terms of the analogy is that there are those who are able to be fortunate, but because of their skills and marketability, to reap the rewards of high value. What I want to inject and inspire to the public out there, let's take ownership and inventory of our own human capital and how we can get down a pathway to grow our toolbox.
It's definitely a food for thought for our viewers. I'm still sitting here taking all that in, thinking about it personally, and then thinking about it for everybody out there my age, of just the mindset of the 40-hour work week. You go to school, you get out, you get a job, and you're stuck muddling in that profession for however many years it is until you retire at 65, sometimes even 70 years old now. And then all you have is to look for 10, 15 years until, it's the end. But to create value, to put yourself above and beyond that person next to you so that you can ascend and transform yourself, transform your skills, and ultimately be in control of your own destiny. Yeah, that's just...
Correct. We have to take ownership for it as opposed to sitting back, because a lot of us are developing the mindset, whether we went to school and we got a job and that's it, and the company directs you what to do. Yeah. We have to not only take ownership, is what is our ultimate pathway for ascent within that company? What can we do to deliver maximum value? And vice versa, how can they deliver maximum value to me? And if it's not within that company, what other potential company? If it's not in that industry, what other industry? And if it's not, how can I do it for myself? We need to take an active ownership in that.
Yeah, that's definitely a powerful message. I think that
it's the only way transformative to true sustainable long-term wealth. And what we're trying to teach and inspire to everyone out there, we're not talking about bling. We're not talking about getting toys and living the high life of this false kind of image that we see out there. We're trying to create financial stability. And to have financial stability, we need to, number one, improve our human capital, which is ultimately our earning capacity. Because once we have in a good upward trajectory of our earning capacity, then it enables us to have the discretionary income, to have savings and investments to build long-term financial wealth. So we have to get those two oars in the lake so that we can row in the same direction.
And then just keep the wheels turning and then just
and snowball build up speed.
Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Once again, another great reflection for the question there. Moving on, what about the risk of recession? I want to talk about that. I know that's been going on in the news. That's been in all of the primary news sources. Is the risk of recession in the end of 2022 and then possibly 2023. We have the holidays coming up.
Well, we're already feeling recession right now. You have two different aspects. You have the technical economic definition by statistics, whether we have 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, but recession is how you feel. It's in your pocketbook and how you make your choices on the weekend, whether you decide to go to the movies, go out for dinner, or stay home.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that is already in terms of there. And more importantly, what it's going to mean in terms of in hiring prospects, whether you were thinking of shopping your resume going around, how you're going to feel in terms of a potential increase in salary, if there are brighter opportunities out there, and as well as those who are trying to get into the workforce or have been out of the workforce for a while and absorbing, or people who wanted to get a little extra side job. Recession influences all of those things because naturally when we have a recession, there's a slowdown, and the number one slowdown is hiring.
Yeah, and the metrics are out there. We have very low unemployment right now, if not almost the lowest, but we also have just tremendous jobs out there. And I feel that everybody's saying that we have really great low unemployment and we have many jobs out there, but the recession's still there. I'm feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. And
because we're going through the corrective process. So you have, in terms of remember, is we had this pandemic that created this tremendous disruption in our supply chain because, as I stated in prior shows, many of the goods that we rely come from overseas. So different countries had experienced different closures and lockdowns, which created bottlenecks throughout the supply chain. In addition, we injected trillions of dollars of aid and relief into basically the economy to keep people propped up. So it dramatically created a shot of kind of steroids of purchasing power. And you also basically had a lot of people who didn't really have anything to do but just sit at home and spend money.
Yeah.
Then, as we're kind of working out of it, we've got basically this war that's going on in Ukraine, which is directly impacting global energy prices and global grain. So we're seeing in terms of in those two forces. So as they're all cyclically working in, but throughout that, as workers were coming back in off of the sidelines from the pandemic, wages were going up because their bargaining power was increasing. But employers, as you're seeing in terms of the travel and hospitality, as we're seeing in restaurants and all these different sectors, they're trying to meet in terms of demand because customers want to get out. We want some respite. We're tired of being cooked up. And so are all in that process of working itself out. But ultimately, like, gravity has to set in because the restaurant can't keep up. Can't keep to pay servers $25 an hour. You can't keep up. So they eventually have to, because their consumers are the ones with the pocket. I can't afford to pay the higher restaurant bill. I can't afford to pay the higher airfare, so I'm going to hold back.
Yeah, exactly.
So it eventually starts to catch up. That's how you get to the cycle.
Interesting.
And you're already starting to see that in some corporate profits. Apple has been down in terms of when they're reporting in terms of their sales on iPhones. You're noticing Netflix. You're noticing on a lot of corporations that you're seeing that canary in the coal mines.
Yeah. And how do you think that some of those profits and some of those companies pulling back to combat the recession to hold those profits as much as they can?
Well, the number one tactic that they do time and time again are layoffs.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the one thing that is controllable in any type of business is headcount, because remember, they've got leases, they have other contractual obligations that are harder to shave. So the first thing that they do is they start with basically layoffs.
And you see a lot of that in the tech sector. Primarily, you spoke Apple.
Will be throughout.
Okay.
The number ones that you're going to see are those that were artificially pumped up. So you'll see those that were the beneficiaries of all that pandemic spending.
Gotcha.
Tech, e-commerce, who are the big beneficiaries, crypto, all those new and emerging. Those are the first ones that you're going to see the massive, but you're also going to see, I imagine, in some of the other consumer discretionary, which is travel, hospitality, and all the other related sectors that rely on consumer spending and retail.
Yeah, and I think that, for example, with gas being the $7 a gallon, I think that a lot of people are going
They're going to cut back on trips.
Cut back for sure.
All across the board. Yes, as a result.
Yeah, exactly.
They have to. And that's the natural result that happens.
Now, with the holiday season coming up, I know it is just the start of October. What can you think? What can you forecast for the holidays coming up? I know there's Thanksgiving, but also Christmas. What can you forecast with if we're in that correction period of the recession?
People are hunkering down.
Okay.
That's basically is the tactic that's happening, is that people are going to hunker down.
Okay.
And they're going to reassess. What I try to advise people is get greedy. Look for the opportunity, because as everyone's hunkering down and fearful, bargains appear.
Yeah, yeah.
And great opportunities and great basically start to avail themselves, because who's fearful is running for the hills, running for cover. And those who are ultimately successful, and how I've been successful throughout my business and personal career, is that I basically found when everything was just basically going and crashing, whether it was investments or business opportunities that would be new and emerging.
And then just get in there and get in while you can, and then hopefully stick it out as much as you can.
The real key to success and wealth is not about following the crowd. It's running away from the crowd. Then the crowd follows you, because in a law of economics is there's only so much profit to go around. And that's the thing that's always so baffling, is this idea of me too, is that everyone thinks is something hot. It's, for example, when you're probably getting around in a social conversation with friends and you're having a few beers, everyone's talking about what coin they have. No, you want to be the person who finds it, not the one who's following to keep up with the Joneses. And that's the recipe for basically being poor and not getting ahead, is being a follower, is keeping up with the Joneses. You want people to follow you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is the real key.
And the key is also is that the intelligence and the research to get there, so you can find
scanning the environment and adopting that strategic mindset.
And then also creates value for yourself, because then you are the leader, and then people will follow you, and you can create that value that you can, hopefully, if it works out, you can sell that value to others and get something from it.
Exactly.
Wow, that's great. Time seems like it's been wrapping up, but a few things to close out the show. I wanted to ask, what are the 3 takeaways from today? We spoke quite a bit. You went in depth about creating value, the inflation costs, everything like that for my generation. What can you think were the takeaways for the viewers out there?
Number 1, let's take in terms of the time and opportunity to intentionally build our community. Let's reach out. Close friends, close family. Let's find opportunities to reconnect with people in person. Turn off the devices. Get off social media. Let's reconnect. Let's have an opportunity to voice and listen to one another of what's bothering us. Voice it. Let's get it out. Let's process it so that we can start getting on the pathway to ascending throughout this in terms of incoming storm that we have to face. But it's better for us to face it together than alone. And then number 2 is we want to basically adopt the power of being interdependent, not independent. Because interdependence is our counterforce to any negative force that comes at us. And so we have to be more and find and develop and craft ways of being interdependent.
That sounds great. That so many things that we just closed out in the last 45 minutes on the show.
Right. And then lastly, I would just like to add to all the viewers in terms of out there as we get ready for Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the holiday season for everyone. Let's find a way to do good deeds. Let's reach out to other people. There might be people in our family for whatever reasons, politics, that we've gone astray, that we can no longer to talk to one another, that there's this divisiveness. We need to find ways to get out and reconnect and bring people back and build some unison and consensus. Because when we're united, there's no stopping what we can do. And that is ultimately what we need to is start by doing those good deeds.
Yeah, and I think that what you just mentioned there is, let's have that for a takeaway for the show, everyone. Do a good deed, whether it's open the car door for someone that you're with, or just smiling and saying hi. Do something good, make you feel better and everything. And as Mr. Rogers presented again, united is what we're about. Unison, communication, and being a good person. That's what we want on the show with Mr. Rogers. And that's what he presents with his many years of business and personal experience to get through these tough times. So I think we're going to close it off, and I'm going to sign off right here. And once again, I'm going to thank Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us in our metahood. You have a blessed day, and everyone a bright future tomorrow.
Thank you.